Welcome to the Google Plus Hangouts for the Sandbox for the summer 2014, and we are interviewing alumni from St. Petersburg College from the Mass Communication Department, some former students checking in, seeing what they're doing. Today we're talking with Samiat Salami, and actually we think that we had class, 3-4 years ago? It's been quite a while, huh? With us today is also Chris Demons. He's a current student. He runs our Sandbox social media, and he's going to chime in and make sure that this all records properly. Good luck, Chris. So, Sonia, you were telling us you kind of went on a whole new direction after St. Petersburg. You just needed to find yourself, and you ended up in England.
I'm sorry?
I said that's kind of a different direction from Florida.
It was, but it was, it's really strange, but I think I found home in England a lot more than America.
Okay.
Which is really interesting, because I think having grown up in Nigeria, some of the cultural dualities are so similar.
Uh-huh.
Because, there was that whole colonization thing, and, we do share a lot of the same language, and not in terms of just the English language, but in terms of slang and
interesting.
Yeah, and just food, Scotch eggs, for example, and things like that. So it was a bit of it was a bit of home, but very different. It was, let's see how the colonizer lives. But yeah, it was really interesting.
Okay, cool. And I saw that you started doing some magazine writing when you were in England. You worked for Was that the name?
Oh yeah, I worked in London, and it was for a retail jewelry magazine called Retail Jeweler. I actually got placed there through a program called the Washington Center.
Oh, uh-huh.
And it's basically this program that takes undergraduate students and takes them to like this intensive educational employment boot camp and how to work in the workforce and that kind of business. It takes you to do that in Washington, and then when you're all crammed up, they send you off to England to intern.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Started with at St. Pete, did a little bit of writing for, I think we did some newspaper. We hadn't actually, the Sandbox had just started, or was just starting. I mean, it was still an idea more than an actual reality. We certainly hadn't gotten into social media yet. But you've done then, from what I'm just thinking back over what I saw on your LinkedIn profile, a lot of doing more journalism work, doing articles with magazines. How'd you end up in California doing creative writing in California?
Oh yeah, it was after I came back from England that I kind of had this realization that yes, it would be nice to have a job that, where I can write every day and do the editorial side of things. But in all honesty, I've always thought of myself more as a storyteller. And it's just such an inherent part of my culture. And at that point, it just felt like, especially going to England and coming back, I just basically realized I'd been trying to write the same novel since I was 13, and I might as well just go to grad school and learn how to do it.
Get it done, get it down.
So. And that's basic. So I applied to many grad schools, and the one I ended up at is in San Francisco. It's called the California College of the Arts. And it was my first bite at an art school.
Okay.
And that was really fun. It's actually a bit of an interesting atmosphere. Before that, because I'd never gone to an art school, so choosing an art school for my master's degree really opened me up to a crazy amount of things, and thinking and artistic practice. So that's wonderful.
Okay. And you've just finished now. You've graduated.
Yeah, I have. I've just finished. Yay. It's a little bittersweet though, because for 2 years I really did feel like I was in a cult. It's the MFA cult, where you just live, breathe, eat, sleep writing for 2 years, and you're constantly reading and constantly writing. I went into grad school with this crazy ideology, like, oh yeah, I can do other things on the side. I'll just, yeah, no, that did not happen. It was very much 2 years of concentration on your craft, and it was really intense. But and even when it was happening, I was like, oh God, I want this to be over so I can breathe again. But now that I'm out of it, I miss it a little. It's only been like 3 weeks.
Well, you've only been out, what, week maybe? Day?
I
Depends.
know, I know. It's like 3 weeks. It's barely
Yeah,
even anything. It's just, I guess, like,
you
I'm
barely
used to
had
the
time to come up for air.
I'm sorry?
You barely had time to come up for air.
I know, I know. I
Mm.
think it's like I'm used to the fast pace of it.
Yeah.
It's very
Did
intense.
you get the book finished? Did you get a book finished?
No, uh, I have the first 100 pages of it.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's halfway there.
Yeah, it is. It's the first 100 pages, and I'm really excited. And it's a
That's
big
good.
chunk. But yeah, it's very much bearing my soul on paper.
Yeah. So you're planning to finish it, though?
I am, and that's where I am right now. You know, I do. It's actually the whole art school thing. I did also get involved in film and like,
Mm-hmm.
and then trying to do film and documentary film and narrative. And I, because I had a at the school they had just started a new directing program,
Oh, uh-huh.
so I also hopped on that boat a bit and actually got to take a couple of like MFA directing and screenwriting classes,
Uh-huh.
and that was really fun. And I actually would like to do that too. But I think for right now, I guess what I'm trying to get at with that, sorry, it's like I'm all over the place, is that I think going to an art school definitely got me to think of myself more as out of that like little box of just writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to think of myself more as an artist. And the more I started to think that way, the more it exposed me to in terms of like work. And I'm starting to think of my work as more project by project.
Yeah.
And my project right now that I've been toiling at for, since I was apparently 13 is my
Uh-huh.
book, and I would like to finish that. So ideally, I would like to have a job to pay the rent, of course, but then, finish it in the next 2 years or so, and then see what happens from there.
It's quite an undertaking. A book is not an easy thing to just to turn out, crank out. So,
It's not. It really isn't. It's you. I think I saw your LinkedIn. You also wrote a book.
yes, mine. I had the idea and got the bones of it written down in the summer because I didn't have any classes, so I had a whole summer to work on it. But then it took about 2 years to finally finish it up and get it polished and get it to a publisher. And that was an ongoing, interesting journey with many, many, many sad, sad and painful episodes.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm
Out
sure.
and publishing, of course, is a whole other area of a whole other field adventure to explore with its own little weird quirks and rules and with promotion and that's where I am now, is trying to learn the fabulous world of promotion and self promotion in social media and how to make sales without spending any money. And
I recall
but
seeing that you were up for an award, Kathy.
yes, yeah, I'm a finalist for the NERFA, National Excellence in Romance Fiction Award.
Yay! That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
Congratulations.
it sounds
Congratulations.
really impressive till people realize that I'm writing a romance novel.
Oh, I think that's underrated. Romance novels are awesome. I feel like people.
Oh, now I'm interested in, you're talking about having different areas and expanding your writing into many other creative areas, and I was really intrigued to see that you're writing. Chris and I were talking about this earlier. How products have changed. You're writing a blog doing promotion for a product that's actually all online. the couples app. It's not a product on a shelf. It's a whole selling of ideas in multiple formats kind of thing. So what's that about? Can you share with
Um, I actually stumbled onto that.
me?
I live in the Bay Area, and the Bay Area, I don't know if you know this, is very tech heavy. It's
Mm-hmm.
This is where it all happens. You know, all those websites that you so casually log onto are about within a 35-minute radius of where I live. And it's really exciting to have that, but also you kind of have to learn to speak the language as a writer. It's like, as a person, you do a lot of constant code switching, and I think as a writer, you have to kind of develop that sense too, especially if you're going to have money to live off. You know,
Yes.
you kind of have to learn to diversify and speak whatever languages and switch voices and do whatever you need to do. And I think, you might think of it as like selling out. Oh, why am I writing an app couple? But it's actually really interesting because all the little minute things you do actually influence your much bigger work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the act of like constantly freelancing and keeping your own deadlines, that trains you to be, you know, yeah, that does train you to actually like get things out on time. It's a business. You're going to have your own invoices and things like that. I didn't realize just how serious that was until I was filing my taxes
Right.
and my tax lady wanted to put me down as a small business owner. And I just laughed in her face. I was just like, I'm sorry, what? When did I become a small business owner? But yeah, it's been interesting writing for Couple, actually, because it's been a lot of fun. I
Yeah.
once wrote an article for them about dating cultures in different countries, and
Right.
I basically just spent a lot of time just researching dating cultures in other countries, and the discoveries I found were just really drastically different from, each side of the globe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I found out like that. I think it was in, I want to say Korea or Singapore, that how America's very much into the, oh, okay, well, we have met and now I wait 3 days to text you or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But in Singapore, Korea, I can't remember which one, if you actually don't text immediately after you meet the person, it's a little strange.
Oh, so there's a whole etiquette for
Yeah,
online overseas.
yeah, it's like there's a little bit of an etiquette to dating depending on what part of the world you are. And that was a really interesting discovery for me, and I've always been into like even I think it doesn't stray too far away from my much larger body of work. Um, I'm always interested in what brings people together, human relationships and family, and just how relationships are cultivated and how people get attached to each other and that kind of business. So it wasn't too far away from me. Researching that was actually just pure fun.
Yeah. Oh, it would be. It would be. Yeah, it's an amazing if you stop and think how much our world is expanding. We're touching into all these different areas that normally you wouldn't get any kind of contact with. But if you're going to be dating somebody overseas, I expect you better learn these things. So.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally too, I'm getting personal. But yeah, I met my boyfriend in England too, and it was a bit of a sore spot for me, because I know that the app also brings long distance couples together.
Yeah.
Because they have this little feature called the thumb kiss, where you
Oh.
can put your thumb on the phone and it vibrates on the other side of the world, and I guess you guys are thumb kissing each other. It sounds really geeky and nerdy, but at the same time, after being in a long distance relationship myself for a really long time, I also know that little things like that really do make a difference.
Oh, neat.
So yeah, my heart was a little in
As a
it.
romance novelist, I'm completely intrigued. I'm thinking, oh.
Oh, I'm sorry. What'd you say?
I said, as a romance novelist, I'm completely intrigued. I'm thinking, oh.
Yeah, I think romance novels are awesome.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
I like it when it's one of the things that people have discussed a lot in the world is books, one of the beauties of self-publishing and publishing ebooks is that they're becoming so much broader. Instead of being the very traditional girl next door meets the guy, falls in love, has a fight, breaks up, and then makes up again. They're becoming much bigger and broader stories with a lot of different cultures and a lot of different types of people, and some of them are very strange and a little too out there. But I like those that writing when it starts to become more reflective of multiple realities, not just one, not nicely neat, polished view of the world.
No, I completely agree. I think that's what, especially with a world, like you said, being so big, I think that's what we're starting to get, a diverse array of literature. I'm definitely one of the #1 supporters of like international literature and examining how stories are told in different cultures. I think for too long, like literature has been fed through the same tube of like elitism, and if that can expand, just like film also, literature and film, it's like with film, the transition from like film to digital the has expanded the amount of stories that are being told, and with literature also, the idea of having blogs and things like that has certainly expanded that, and yeah, I'm all for it because people, underdogs like me, get to benefit from that.
You can't have just one neat, polished view of the world, and the other part of it is you get a much more realistic view of the world. I mean, if you go with just what gets reported on the news, sometimes it's always the dramatic, it's always the frequently very violent, and that's not necessarily indicative of what's. Yes, it may be indicative of some of the problems different countries are having, but not necessarily the people who live there or the culture that thrives there or the culture that's working to survive or change or evolve or whatever the real problem is. It's a very narrow viewpoint. So the more you can include in your view, in your reporting or your story or your film, the bigger, broader picture you get. I've seen some newspapers done a really good job. The New York Times has done that, where they start bringing into a story multiple write-ups, multiple videos, multiple interviews. It'll all be on the same page, but it's many, many different points of view.
Yeah.
So, richer story. So.
It definitely is, because, it's one of the things, when I first got to the U.S., I think I was about 13 or 14, and you would be astonished by just how little kids in the U.S. can sometimes know about the countries, and it's not their fault. I mean, at first I was like really upset, It's like, yes, I had toothbrushes in Africa. How dare you ask me that question? And I did not have pet lions. Why would you think that's appropriate to say? I actually had this class once when I was in the middle of, I went to St. Pete High, and I was in the middle of class this one day, and it was the early morning mathematics class, so I was not mentally present. And I remember this one day, it was a bit of a down day, so sometimes the teacher would allow you to watch films. And I fell asleep. And the other kids in class were watching, I think it must have been Roots, which is such a peculiar film to pick in an undergrad class, not undergrad, but in a high school class of high school sophomores. Anyway, so I had fallen asleep, and all of a sudden I get 7 kids crowded around my desk, just shaking me. Hey, wake up! Salami, wake up! Salami, wake up! And I'm like, why? What? And they're like, oh, yeah, do you know what he's saying? Do you know what he's saying? And I suppose it's like the scene where Kunta Kinte is talking to other people. And just because I'm African, I'm supposed to speak all African language, all 10 million of them dialects. So I should interpret because, And when I said, I don't know, they just laughed. And for a good percentage of high school, some people actually called me Kunta or Kinte, whichever one they preferred. So it's like, the point of that is, it's like it does filter down to the kids and what they're learning and their view of the world. I mean, the world might be getting bigger, but if you still get your information through the same tube, you're not necessarily learning anything varied.
No. It's
Oh, I'm sorry, you were saying?
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm just nodding in agreement. I'm trying not to nod too much. Chris says I actually tend to move too much for the camera, and so
Oh,
he ends up having to cut uh, bits of film out because the camera's flipping around it.
It
And
isn't so much the
I,
movement, it's when you bang your desk. It makes
I'm
the
trying not
whole
to
MacBook
do
Air
that.
jump up and down.
yeah,
I'm working at the broadcast end of it.
I'll be aware of that too, because I don't know if you've noticed, I've got like 15 million expressions in one. Like, I think I'm a very expressive person. I'm always constantly moving. But yeah, it is really important to me, because, like, the the saying, kids are the future is so extremely cliche, but really, really true. Like, if you raise narrow, small-minded children because you don't teach them enough about the world, they're going to become narrow-minded adults who have
Yeah.
who know very little about the world. And that just becomes like a ridiculous cycle that keeps them like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the thing is there's so many beautiful things out there in the world. It's really frustrating if people limit themselves. There's wonderful stories from all over. So really, and sometimes we just get so busy. You have to finish the degree. You got to take the classes. You got to get a job, and people just get. Sorry, Chris, I bumped the computer. But sometimes it's a shame if people can't go out and explore other things. You may not adopt everything that you run into, but at least be aware of all the wonderful variations and richness that exists. So,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. I think in some ways technology helps us get there, at least get closer.
I agree. It certainly does. Like, I think if I were writing an article about dating cultures in different countries
Mm-hmm.
30 years ago, I can't even imagine just how tedious that would have been. I would have probably spent ages at the library, like, avidly researching. And I know for even just creative writers, too, I mean, we still have to go to the library, we still have to do a lot of research. But it is nicer to have the internet because you could always look up really interesting Google searches, especially when you're writing about interesting twisted characters. And then whoever looks at computer searches can go, what is wrong with this person?
As long as you don't, this is a problem mystery writers have, when their search history is all about poisons. That's when you worry. Otherwise, no, you're fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've looked up some most ridiculous things, but it has also been really helpful though. I recently wrote a short story about. So there is an event that happened in Lagos, and I think it was in 2002, which is very similar to 9/11 in the U.S. Not similar in terms of its fact that it's a terrorist attack, but it really shook Lagos and the community because it was very unexpected. I
Mm-hmm.
remember being about 12 or 11 and being outside my house and just watching the sky turn red because
Wow.
a bunch of bombs had just exploded in a military barracks not very far away from
Wow.
my house, and it was just such a changing experience for me because at that point, being a child, you don't understand the concept of the world changing drastically like that or sky turning red. It was actually a really scary event. Lots of people. Sorry.
That's
Lots,
right.
yeah, lots of people must have passed and did pass, thousands and thousands of people. So it was really important to me when I was writing my book, which is from the perspective of a young girl, to have that event be grounded in it. And without the internet, it would have been really difficult for me to write that because I had to go online and pull up old archives of the event and the date and all the struggles that people had gone through, and it was really insane actually. A lot of
Right.
insane discoveries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, No question, I think has helped research enormously.
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah. So now, one of the things I was curious about was you're doing a lot of PR work. Are you finding that different from your creative? I mean, there's a certain amount of overlap between PR and news, but and of course the lines are getting blurrier all the time. How's that working out? The
You mean
well,
what you,
like the creative work you're doing for couples, it's fun. It's you know, writing the blog, talking about romance and dating for the website, but it has a PR function. It's to promote the app. Do you
hmm
find that there's a is it shaping your writing, affecting it? Not really, just part of the avenue to explore.
Yeah, yeah, it is. But you know, to say that even when you're doing the creative, you're not aware of your audience is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're aware, you're constantly, I mean, you try not to think about it in the process of writing because it does hinder your own creative process. But when you do go to workshop, you do get an audience who tell you, hey, I'm not from this culture, so I'm going to need you to translate just about everything. And it's like that. I mean, I'm not new to thinking about what my audience needs to read or what they need to actually get to where I want them to be mentally.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that sense, it's not too much of a departure because even when I'm doing creative work, I'm always thinking about audience. Um, as far as selling things to people, you know, I just try not to take on things I don't believe in.
An important distinction.
Yeah, it's just I I've got my politics and how I feel about the world and things, and I just if I don't genuinely believe that this would be a good thing for people, you know, as I told you about a couple, it was I actually started working there because I went to a meetup. It was really interesting. I just moved here, and a friend of mine and I went to a meetup, and I met one of the, I think the head community director at the meetup. He had just moved here too, and I
Wow.
ended up talking to him about it, and I got really interested, and that's how I started blogging there. So I try not to take on things that I don't care about because I also know that words can be very deceptive and you shouldn't use them for evil.
This is true. I think that's an important consideration for everybody, you know, especially those of us who are making a living with your talent as something you care about. You know, it's not just, well, I don't know if there is any job anymore where you just put widgets together, but, um, you know, you try to find employment, something that pays the bill, but also something you care about. And then it's
Yeah,
so important to, if you're going to marry those two, to keep in mind, you know, what it is you're doing, why it is you're doing what it is you care about. That's
yeah,
what you need. It's kind of convoluted, but
and it's
yeah. So I
very
was curious how you're managing to use your writing and progress career-wise, even though it's, you know, sometimes people think creative writing is really just not a viable career. So, but it looks like you're doing a lot of PR work very successfully. So
yeah. And with my creative writing, I think you know it was a tough decision thinking about whether to go in grad school. It's like everyone would ask me, so you're going to grad school to study writing? What are you going to do with that?
yeah.
And it was a very tough decision to make, and certainly moving to the Bay Area, it's crazy expensive here. So expensive. But at the same time, it's where I need to be right now. It's got such a thriving artistic scene. It really did like I did grow that much from being here. I, you know, and with my writing, I have gotten some like little leg ups of like events that have happened that make me happy and keep me going. You know, I got to perform. It was poetry. I got to perform my poems at the Jazz Poetry Festival,
Oh wow.
and that was awesome. It was a really, really great event. It was fantastic. It was such a weird little thing for me. I was so excited, and you know, I had spoken to one of my professors about it, and he had told me about it. I don't know if you're familiar with the writer Ishmael Reed.
I don't think so. If I
Yeah.
saw the book, perhaps names don't always register with me. So,
Oh, it's
yeah.
like a lot of writers out there. But yeah, Ishmael was a really, really fantastic teacher. He's definitely so accomplished in himself. He's like, I mean, I feel like he's one of those classic like American writers. But having the opportunity to be in
Yeah.
class.
Send me a link, send me a name, and so I can follow up because I have to follow up with the classic American writers.
Yeah, definitely. And it was such a wonderful experience because then,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I read it I read it at the poetry festival last year, but that was a very last minute thing. But this year, I was actually given like advance notice and like
Oh,
water. I got water from the people who give you water for like because you're an artist, which was really crazy to me. I mean, I got little snacks too, but I was more impressed with the water. But yeah, it was really great. And it's interesting to see, like, as an artist, how you build a fan base, or not even fan base, or how you build readers. Because after, I had a couple of people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, that was really awesome. You want to be my friend on Facebook?" I was like, "Okay." It's weird. Okay, I'll do it. It's awesome. I'm glad you're relating to my work. That's awesome. And I had a really, really lovely old woman ask me when my book was coming out. And I was like, oh, someday soon when I'm able to get it out. But that was great. And I've had a couple of readings here that I do try to, like, read. And especially now that I'm out of grad school, I'm trying to get my work more and more out there, which is sending journals and things like that. But yeah.
school's nice. It helps you get, refine your skills, but it does take up a lot of time.
What does?
I said school's nice because it helps you refine your skills, but it does take up a lot of time.
Oh yeah. I mean, there was just no time for anything else. Like my schedule was. I mean, I'm I'm good. I'm better for it because I really learned to like juggle 15 million things and prioritize. Because at the time I was also I was blogging for a couple. I was also a TA. I was a teaching assistant, and at some point during all of that, I was also a tour giver slash assistant student office person, and I was taking 15 credit hours a semester.
Oh.
When did you sleep?
There was no sleep. And my course load was like, read a book a week. So, write 20 pages for workshop. Okay. Like, read 60 pages of your classmates' work. Okay. It was really intense. There was very little sleeping involved, actually. I did not sleep. But it's like, not, and I kept thinking, it was a weird mixture of, oh, I feel so gratified to be here, and oh God, when is this going to be over? And it was just really interesting to have a community of writers, and I had really, really good teachers. I had great professors, actually. They were so given in their knowledge, which was wonderful. And living in the Bay Area, there's like a really strong literary scene here.
Yes.
I mean, this is one of the places in the world that you can still walk around saying, "Oh, I'm a writer," and everyone will ask you, "Oh, what are you working on?" As opposed to, "What do you actually do?" You know.
Yeah.
I really like that about here. It's a thriving writing community. You have Litquake and Beast Crawl, and you never feel deprived of. Even being out of grad school, you never feel like, oh, I'm not going to get to go to workshops anymore because you still know a lot of writers, and there's always readings, and there's always a reading somewhere. You just got to find where it is, and it's not too hard to find. People will tell you.
That's a wonderful environment to live in and work in.
Oh,
It's a really. So you would encourage then anybody at St. Pete to go on to move outside the state and try other schools and try grad school?
Oh yeah, I mean, grad school isn't one of those things where I'm just like, oh yeah, you have to do it. It's expensive,
Mm-hmm.
especially like, and it depends on what kind of grad school which kind of grad school you go to. I picked an art school without thinking too heavily about it, but I think it's actually been the best option for me because it's forced me to grow in ways that I never even thought possible. Because there are things I've always been interested in that I actually got the chance. You know, I've always been interested in film. I've always been interested in like writing more poetry and you know doing more art installations and things like that. And I did a like poetry installation in one of my classes, and that was really awesome. It was to not underestimate just how filthy you get when you're doing art installation, like covered in paint and like dirt. It's like I was also working around a pond, but it's given me. It depends on what you want, and there are people who are happy to go into the middle of Iowa, do a program in Iowa and just like seriously crank out that book they've always wanted to write.
Yeah.
The thing to be aware of is if you pick an art school, or if you pick a school in a city, there are distractions.
Yes.
And
Yes.
especially in a thriving scene like this, there's always the art world is big here, the literary world's big here. There's always something, and it's like, but it is a part of that foil though, because it's like you don't feel like you're just doing something that doesn't matter. You see it actually manifesting, you know. It's like you write all day and at the weekends you go to readings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't sleep much, but you get a lot out of it.
You do get a lot out of it, and you get to meet like grad school's good for networking. I got to meet the editor of National Geographic Traveler, which was like crazy for me. I was just like, and I met him because one of my professors was like, "Oh, go to a thing. It's a reading of international women travel writers," and I was like, "Okay, I'll go." And I'm a little shy at these things, and there are all these really accomplished people around me, and I'm like, what am I doing here? But then I started talking to the editor of National Geographic Traveler, and he was like, well, if you ever have anything, send it to me. And I was like, okay. And I don't have anything yet, but I would be more than happy to send it to him when I do. You meet people like that all the time.
That's important. They say that that's the number one way to, in the job thing, is to, it's who you know. You
Yeah,
keep applying and keep applying, and then you have to sooner or later know somebody to break past that computer where you just dumped all your information.
yeah. Especially in the process of like, I told you I've been job searching right now because I've just graduated. And I know it might not seem like it right now, but I'm a weird mix between an introvert and an extrovert. Like every time I talk to people in a setting like that, especially when I have to talk about myself and my work, I'm a little more comfortable talking about my creative writing. But when it comes to like actual, like, oh, what do you do, and can I network for a job? A part of me just reverses back to that shy African kid in high school. It's
Yeah.
just, I don't want to do it. Oh, please don't make me do it. Oh, please don't make me do it. But you just kind of have to open your mouth. And
Yeah.
it's like, and sometimes I'm thinking, oh God, the words that are coming out of my mouth do not match thoughts in my head. But you just gotta do it and realize a lot of it is your own neurosis.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend that. As writers, we kind of as writers need to see the world. You can't. I mean, there are people who happily write from their own like space of where they're from. That's great. But I think whatever can enrich your writing, whatever can give you that really pleasant metaphor or simile or imagery, just keep traveling. I would travel as much as I can if I could.
Hmm.
Keep traveling, keep writing.
I think that's a great recommendation. I think everybody should at least try it. If you decide
Yeah.
later to come home, that's fine, but at least you've tried it, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you come back home, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it depends what kind of person you are. I think having immigrated so early, or emigrated so early, I I'm a little weird about my sense of space. I don't feel like anywhere is instantaneously my sense of space, like my place and where I'm from. It's just that for a moment. So I'm a lot easier when it comes to the whole getting up and going thing.
Interesting effect.
So yeah, with that sense, I am a little more flexible and like, yeah, I'm here for right now, and I really love it. But I don't know where I'd be in 5, 10 years.
Well, San Francisco is a beautiful place to hang until you figure out where you want to be.
So
And
beautiful. San Francisco is great, but it's crazy expensive. I live in Oakland, and Oakland's also awesome. Because when the city, San Francisco, got way too expensive for all the artists, they moved to Oakland, which is great. uh, and it's like living in the Bay Area too. It's got like such a huge history of like activism and writers. You know, Kerouac is, and you know the whole like beatnik period of San Francisco, Kerouac and Ginsberg and things like that. But then you also have the Black Panther Party from Oakland, and there is a huge like tendency to want to create things that matter around here.
See, they have the perfect blend of warm weather so you can get out and do stuff, but not so hot like Florida where you really just have to go inside and be in the air conditioning.
Yeah. It's not like perfect weather. And I think Oakland's actually a little hotter than San Francisco. Because in San Francisco, you could get a really sunny, wonderful day, and then it's just wind.
Whoosh. Right off the bay.
Yeah, it's just like wind. But yeah, over here it is nice. And I like the view. You could always walk up any random hill and see a really wonderful view. I don't like driving around everywhere.
No, the traffic, as I remember it, is a bit much. But you can walk.
Not much even here.
Traffic's intense over there?
Oh, driving is still crazy in the Bay Area. It's probably worse than when you were here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, Highway 19 is always torn up, so, you know, it just never ends. And I think Highway 4 is trying to do its best to imitate 19 and just stay torn up for the, you know, foreseeable duration.
Oh.
But, you know, we didn't need those roads anyway.
Yeah, who needs to get from point A to point B, really, ever?
Well, Sam, thank you so much for sharing with us, and we certainly wish you well. And be sure to send me your resume, or actually what I can do is show your clip around, and if you're into teaching at all, I don't know if St. Pete will ever have openings, but you never know. So
pass it around.
See what happens with your book and how the movie turns out. You thought about who you want to play your central character?
You know, I actually I've only now written the short film, and I've gotten into directing it myself because
She's in the hands-on control.
Yeah, I'm just really hands-on, and you know, Hollywood is not Hollywood, but the film industry is so it gets into race and all sorts, you know. It's like really complicated to write a story about black women and try to find someone to actually direct it. It's crazy. You have to get off of your own butt and do it yourself. So it's I actually started shooting already.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was for my directing. So there's class. So I have shot a couple of scenes, and right now I'm in the middle of like shooting more / editing. So I did find a couple of local actors to work with, and they're awesome.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to see that. Well, we expect big things from you because obviously you've got big projects in the work, you know. So this is exciting. I always like to see where students end up. And I'd like to say they don't surprise me and that, you know, I just know that everybody's going to end up brilliant, but I'm always surprised, which probably tells you something about, I don't know, maybe I just don't have that as much imagination as they do. But
Oh, I think you teach your students pretty well. I remember your class. It was really great. I mean, you were, you certainly weren't not memorable because the moment I saw your name on LinkedIn, I was like, oh yeah, Kathy. You know, it's,
Oh,
if you teach
oh
your
yeah,
students well, you have to. They'll end up in really good places.
this is cool. I think you did. We're
Oh,
very impressed, and congratulations on getting that master's finished. That is a big accomplishment. Yay!
yeah, thank you,
Oh,
thank you. And I'd like to check out your book sometime.
oh, well, thank you. It's on Amazon, and the sequel is coming out in June sometime when I um, finally, we get it all together. Editing is a lovely ongoing process of proofreading and proofreading and proofreading. But, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Oh, I just finished my thesis and yeah,
Yeah,
world.
proofreading, proofreading. And the funny part is when you go back a year from now, the first thing you'll spot will be an area you missed.
Oh my god. Okay, so like it's first of all, you killed all your darlings. You labored over the sentences and you wrote them so like wonderfully and crap and it's like, oh, it's not working. Excel, Excel, Excel. And it's like five and I was working on the short story and I had to get rid of it was about 30 pages long. But I had to get rid of an entire like 5 pages of a wedding scene because it was just not working. And I couldn't make it work. And I realized I actually just wanted to talk about traditional Nigerian Yoruba weddings a lot more that was actually working in that scene.
Yeah.
So I couldn't make it work and I had to take out all 5 pages of it and that hurt a lot. You know? Because
Yeah.
there's research that had gone into that and it's just like yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the irritant
The
is
longest time I had to save everything I cut in another file because I just couldn't quite bring myself to throw it away, and it was just there in case I needed it back.
oh yeah, I don't get rid of them. They're
Yeah.
just new stories on their own.
Mhm.
Take it out and they become stories on their own. It's like a short.
Yeah. I never went back after it was finished. The file's still there. It hasn't been opened, but at least I got me through the cutting process. So that's what counted.
You're not alone.
Hard to let go.
To you. Yeah, tough. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's hard to be a reader of your own work.
Oh, yes. It's a scary, scary process. Chris works. Now you've been doing some writing. What do you think? The creative, the editing, what's the hard part?
Honestly, I have a lot harder time with writing than editing, but both of them have their moments.
Yeah.
Creative, the editing, that's the worst.
Because
That's my
like
vote.
with writing, you could just like I mean, writing is difficult, but then it's only difficult when you think you're supposed to be writing in a certain voice or when you think you're supposed to be writing in a certain way. You really just have to kind of get rid of all the things that are inhibiting you, like your insecurities. And just even if you think it sounds like absolute crap, you just need to write it. And then you deal with it later.
Yeah.
But I feel like editing is just like checking for grammar errors and things like that, which is really tough. Revision is the hardest part for me. Because when you're revising, you're checking about the structure of the story as a whole. You're checking individual paragraphs, individual sentences, how the characters are developing, how what's working in a scene. You're basically a director. You're using props. It's like what props are working, what props are not. And it's like, because this all came out of your head. It's not
Yes.
particularly difficult for me.
I don't know. I think editing just comes a little easier to me because, after I draft, I'll leave something like for several days before I touch it again, and then when I come back to it, it's very easy to see what didn't work, at least for me. But when I'm writing, I'll get like halfway through a sentence, and I'm like, well, I could do this differently, and it would be better, so I'll go back, and then I'll try writing it again, and the same thing happens over and over and over, till about 10 revisions of the sentence while I'm writing later, I finally just throw up my hands and say this is how it's going to be till it gets to edit.
But I don't think you should interpret that as a bad thing. I think everyone goes through that. It is the process. When you're writing a book, and there are two phases of it. When you're writing a book, for example, I don't know how many drafts of your books you wrote, Kathy, but sometimes you get through like 36, 60 crazy amount of drafts or something, like 100.
I think I lost count in one chapter after 23.
Yeah.
That chapter was not going to happen.
Yeah, you just throw your hands in the air. It's like constant revision. So a lot of people get the difference between writing, revision, and editing confused. Editing is actually, it's not difficult. Sorry, it's not easy, but it's not as difficult as the rest of it. Because editing, it's just, okay, is that comma working? Is that period working? But when you're in the revision phase, the revision is still writing, because you're completely looking at the entire body of work and seeing how all the sentences work with each other, and that will make you crazy.
You're trying to get it all to match what's in your head.
Yeah.
I always get a vision of what I want, but then my words are just not showing it.
Or it's like when you write something and you have other people read it, and you're completely convinced that you are being blatantly obvious. And then someone else is like, I don't get it.
Yeah, writing would be so much easier without readers, I swear.
It's like, I don't get it. It's like, you want to leave across the room and go, what do you mean you don't get it? But it's true, they don't get it. So you have to go back and write it again. It's just part of the process.
Yeah.
With articles, too. I think my biggest advice to you, if I could give you one, because I tend to walk around giving unnecessary advice. If you could, like when you're writing, Chris, just don't edit until you're done. Like
I've heard that a lot. I try, but it's like that sore tooth. I just can't quite stop doing it.
Yeah. You'll figure out a rhythm. I'm sorry, you were saying, Kathy?
Oh, he sounds like a person who naturally blends his editing and his revising who revises as he writes. That's his natural method.
Yeah.
You just have to embrace it and know that anytime you write, Chris, you're going to write the same sentence 10 times. Yeah. And then eventually it'll get out. And it's easy, right? Just write it 10 times. And
yeah. That is the thing, though. We all don't think alike. The writing voice is called a voice for a reason, because we all have different ways of seeing the world and interpreting it. So your voice is your voice for a reason. And you should understand that with that voice also comes the stylistic choice to write the way you do. Or, how you interpret writing is not the same way that I interpret it. So you just have to kind of embrace your rhythm.
That seems sensible.
Yeah, you'll figure it out. Eventually, you'll just kind of get into the rhythm of it. The more you do it.
Oh, eventually, it does kind of just blur out, and I stop being irritated and I actually finish the dang thing.
Yeah, that whole deadline thing also helps.
I'm better with deadlines, though. I'm very bad about putting off.
Yeah.
It helps.
Yeah, once I'm told this literally needs to be out in like 5 minutes. It's like, okay, you don't have the time to be neurotic. Just write.
Yes, just get it done. Get it written.
It done. And worry about that crap later. You'd be surprised by what you're capable of in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Really. With my thesis, in a week I ended up writing a crazy amount of like 50 pages or something. I did not know I was capable of that. And when I was working at Retail Jeweler, I remember this one day, my boss was at a trade show. I got to the office in the morning and realized no one was there. I saw a nice happy note for me on a desk saying, "Hey, Samia, bring all of the proofs to the trade show." I was like, oh, simple. I go to the trade show with the proofs. I get there and she's like, oh yeah, well, I'm gonna edit this, and I'm gonna need you to take it back. But in the meantime, I need you to interview 5 people at this trade show. And oh, I want you to do this all within the space of about an hour, while you're on public transportation. And it's like, what? Okay. Interview, oh yeah, and when you're done interviewing these people, I want you to do a write-up on it. It's like, all within the space of an hour? Are you insane? So it was very much like, you'd be surprised about what you're capable of in a really short amount of time. Might not be your best work, but you would get it done.
Sometimes that is the best, the best work that's going to happen. Just get it done, and it works out fine. That's all you can ask for. So, I think we are hitting our limit on time, so we're, rather than give Chris hours and hours to cut and edit and paste and make his life difficult.
Yeah, we should go.
Yeah.
I know what that's like. I edit too, and
Yeah.
sorry.
Our raw stuff that, I mean, people are welcome to sit in on the, fortunately nobody does. You can cut out that computer wobble there. But what goes out on the internet does get edited, just because there's always some glitch. So, Samiat, thank you so much for coming and talking with us, and keep us posted, okay? Follow what goes on. I expect to see the announcements on LinkedIn so that I can share them with everybody else.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. I want to know where you do end up teaching your next.
Oh yeah, I do like. I don't know how many people actually read it, but I do actually put the announcements out on social media, so it's always there.
It gets there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's really nice talking to you guys.
Nice talking to you too. And we'll see you shortly.
All right. Bye.
Bye.